In the scriptural justice system, the highest authority, the Most High Yah, is the judge and the jury. The seed of Israel are his children. These are their stories. The team is deep into research on the Siddis. Riley is scrolling through historical documents on his laptop. He suddenly stops, stares at the screen, then looks up, visibly angry. Riley, you've got to be kidding me. Chen, what? Riley, Gandhi. Banks, what about him? Riley stands, pacing now, laptop in hand. Riley, everyone loves Gandhi, right? Mahatma Gandhi, great soul, peaceful resistance, champion of the oppressed. They made movies about him. Ben Kingsley won an Oscar. Schools named after him. Statues everywhere. The icon of non-violent protest. Okafor Riley, what did you find? I'm reading his writings from when he lived in South Africa, 1893 to 1914, and this man, this so-called champion of human rights, was a racist, and not just casually racist. He actively supported apartheid and defended the caste system. Wait, what? Riley projects documents on the screen, scanned pages from Gandhi's own writings. Riley, let me read you some quotes. These are from Gandhi's own pen. Not taken out of context, not misinterpreted. His words. Quote 1. Africans as savages, Riley. 1904. Gandhi is in South Africa. He's fighting for Indian rights, but only Indian rights. Here's what he writes about black Africans in his newspaper, Indian Opinion. He reads from the screen. Ours is one continual struggle against a degradation sought to be inflicted upon us by the Europeans, who desire to degrade us to the level of the raw Kaffir, whose occupation is hunting, and whose sole ambition is to collect a certain number of cattle to buy a wife with, and then pass his life in indolence and nakedness. He looks up. Raw Kaffir. That's what he called black Africans. The same slur used by white supremacists in South Africa, and he's saying Indians shouldn't be degraded to the level of Africans. Not that nobody should be degraded, but that Indians are above Africans. He used Kaffir, Riley, multiple times throughout his writings. He called black Africans savages, troublesome, lazy, over and over. Quote 2. Segregation. Indians should not live with Africans. 1906. Gandhi writes about segregation in Johannesburg, and here's what he says. He pulls up another document. About the mixing of the Kaffirs with the Indians, I must confess I feel most strongly. I think it is very unfair to the Indian population, and it is an undue tax even upon the proverbial patience of my countrymen. He looks at the team. He's complaining that Indians have to live near black Africans. He's advocating for segregation. He wants Indians separated from Africans because, in his mind, Africans are beneath them. Banks, he supported apartheid. Riley, yes. Before apartheid was even officially called apartheid, Gandhi was arguing for racial segregation, as long as it kept Indians away from black people. Quote 3. Supporting the British Empire's wars. Chen, wait, wasn't Gandhi against violence? Non-violence was his whole thing. That's the myth. Here's the reality. Gandhi actively recruited Indians to fight for the British Empire, multiple times. He pulls up more documents. Riley, 1899, Boer War. Gandhi organises an Indian ambulance corps to support the British against the Boers, white Afrikaners. He's trying to prove Indians are loyal subjects of the Empire and deserve rights by helping the British wage war. 1906, Zulu Rebellion. The Zulu people in South Africa rise up against British colonial oppression. The British respond with brutal violence, massacring Zulus. And Gandhi? He organises Indian stretcher-bearers to support the British troops. He reads another quote. I felt that if I demanded rights as a British citizen, it was also my duty as such to participate in the defence of the British Empire. Okafor, he helped the British suppress a native African uprising. Exactly. The Zulus were fighting for their freedom, and Gandhi sided with the colonisers, because in his mind Indians deserved rights, but Africans, they were savages. Banks. What about within India? The Siddis are at the bottom of the social hierarchy. Did Gandhi advocate for them? Riley, nope. Gandhi defended the caste system his entire life. He pulls up another document, this one from Gandhi's later writings in India. He called the caste system a division of labour and said it was necessary for social order. He opposed untouchability in theory, said untouchables, Dalits, shouldn't be treated badly, but he never advocated for dismantling the caste system itself. I believe in Varnashrama caste system, which, in my opinion, is based on truth and equity. I do not believe in caste in the modern sense. It is an excrescence and a handicap on progress. But the caste system as such is based on truth. So he's saying caste is fine, but the worst abuses of it are bad? Riley, exactly. He wanted to reform it, not abolish it, which meant people like the Siddis, dark-skinned at the bottom of society, would stay at the bottom, just be treated nicely while they're down there. Quote 5. Gandhi on black Africans in his ashram. Okafor, did Gandhi ever acknowledge or work with Africans or people of African descent? Riley, there's a story about that. In the 1930s, a black African man wanted to join Gandhi's ashram in India. Gandhi initially hesitated. His associates pressured him to accept the man, and eventually he did, but there are accounts that Gandhi was uncomfortable with it. He pulls up a biographical reference. Riley, historian Ashwin Desai documented this. Gandhi worried that having a black man at the ashram would scandalize Indian society. Think about that. The man who's supposed to be about equality was worried about the optics of accepting a black person. Banks and the Siddis? Did Gandhi ever advocate for them? Riley, I searched. I found nothing. No writings, no speeches, no advocacy. The Siddis, dark-skinned, African-descended at the bottom of Indian society, were invisible to Gandhi. He fought for Indian independence. He fought for Indians' rights in South Africa. But black people, Africans, the Siddis? Silence. Continuous. Riley slams his laptop shut, visibly frustrated. Riley, so let me get this straight. The world celebrates this man as a champion of the oppressed. But when he had the chance to stand with black Africans who were being brutalized under colonialism and apartheid, he called them savages. When he had the chance to dismantle caste, which keeps people like the Siddis in poverty, he defended it as necessary. When he had the chance to advocate for non-violence, he recruited Indians to fight in British colonial wars. He looks at the team. And we're supposed to believe he's a hero? Okafor. Gandhi did evolve. His later writings show some regret for his earlier views. Cutting her off? Some regret. He never fully repudiated his racism. He never apologized to black Africans. He never dismantled the systems that oppressed the Siddis, and the world gave him a pass because he's Mahatma Gandhi. Banks. You know why, Riley? Because his non-violence was convenient for white people. It made colonialism and oppression look civil. It let the British feel good about eventually granting independence because Gandhi asked nicely. But if black Africans had used his tactics, if enslaved people had used non-violent resistance, they'd still be in chains. Riley, exactly. Non-violence works when your oppressor has a conscience, or at least cares about public image. But when your oppressor sees you as subhuman, when they call you Kaffir and savage, non-violence just gets you killed. Chen. So what do we do with this? Do we include it in the episode? Banks, absolutely, because it's directly relevant to the Siddis. Gandhi is held up as the father of modern India, the moral compass, but he did nothing for the Siddis. He did nothing for the darkest-skinned, most marginalized people in the country he claimed to liberate. She walks to the board, writes in large letters, Gandhi, hero to some, silent to others. The Siddis have been erased from Indian history, forgotten, marginalized, and the man who could have advocated for them, who had the platform, the influence, the moral authority, chose not to, because in his worldview, they didn't matter. Riley, and that's why we're here, to document what gets erased, to say the names nobody says, to bring receipts on the people history wants to protect. Gandhi's not the villain of this story. Colonialism is. Racism is. The slave trade is. But he's also not the hero everyone pretends he is. He's complicated, flawed, human. Banks, and we're going to tell the truth about him, because the Siddis deserve the truth. They deserve to know that the great soul of India never fought for them. Riley, Mahatma Gandhi, revered worldwide. Nobel Peace Prize, wait, he never won it. They nominated him 5 times and never gave it to him. Maybe the Nobel Committee saw what we're seeing. He turns back to the team. History is written by the victors, and sometimes the victors protect their heroes by erasing the inconvenient parts. But we're not here to protect heroes. We're here to find the truth, and the truth is, Gandhi was silent when the Siddis needed a voice. He was complicit when they needed an advocate, and the world celebrates him anyway. She pauses. The Siddis are still here, still poor, still marginalized, still waiting for someone to fight for them. Gandhi didn't, India didn't, but we're documenting their existence, because even if the world forgot them, Deuteronomy didn't. The prophecy said they'd be scattered. The prophecy said they'd find no ease, and the prophecy doesn't forget. Let's get back to work. We've got 300,000 to 850,000 Siddis to document, and we're not stopping until the world knows they exist. South Asia, the Siddis, Africa's forgotten children in India, scattered to the east. Deuteronomy 28 verse 64, "And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other end of the earth." Job 1:15, "And the Sabeans fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword." Sabeans equals ancient peoples of Yemen, Arabian Peninsula, connected to slave trade routes. South Asia equals 4,000 plus miles east of Jerusalem. This episode documents the African diaspora in South Asia, the Siddis, India, Siddis, Pakistan, Kaffirs, Sri Lanka, and small communities in Bangladesh. These are the descendants of enslaved East Africans transported via the Arab-Indian Ocean slave trade, 7th to 19th centuries. DNA evidence proves their East African origin. Historical records document their enslavement, military service, and marginalization. And critically, if Hebrews scattered into East Africa after 70 AD and 35 AD, episodes 3 to 4, then when Arabs and Portuguese enslaved East Africans centuries later, they were enslaving descendants of scattered Israelites. Fade in, NTSA-LTD bullpen day. The murder board now shows a massive map of South Asia with arrows tracing routes from East Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, Kenya, Somalia, across the Indian Ocean to India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. Detective Sarah Banks stands before it, pointing to clusters marked Siddis in Gujarat, Karnataka, Goa and Hyderabad. Detective Marcus Chen enters, coffee in hand. Chen, India? We're documenting Israelites in India now? Banks, not Israelites who went directly to India, but descendants. Remember episodes 3 and 4, we proved Hebrews scattered into East Africa after 70 AD and 135 AD. DNA evidence, ancient records, migration patterns, they were there. She taps the East African coast on the map. Then, starting in the 7th century, the Arab slave trade begins. Episode 5 documented it. East Africans, including those carrying Hebrew bloodlines, were captured and sold across the Indian Ocean. Millions, for over 1,300 years. She traces the arrow from East Africa to India. And some ended up here, in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. They're called Siddis. And DNA testing proves they're descended from East Africans, which means they're carrying the bloodline of scattered Israelites. Dr. Amara Okafor enters with files. Okafor, the Siddis are one of the most forgotten communities in the world, between 250,000 and 850,000 people of African descent living in South Asia. Most Indians don't even know they exist. They're marginalized, poor, excluded. But their DNA tells a story that goes back 2,000 years. Riley Thompson pulls up a laptop, projects DNA charts. Riley, we've got the genetic evidence. Studies from Stanford, University of Pune, Indian genetics labs. The Siddis carry East African mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome markers, specifically haplogroup L, East African maternal lineage, and haplogroup E, common in East African populations, including Ethiopia, where we documented the Beta Israel Hebrews. Chen, so we're connecting the dots. Hebrews in East Africa, Arab slave trade, India, Siddis carry that bloodline. Banks, exactly. The prophecy said scattered among all people, that includes South Asia, and we're about to prove it. The team assembles. Riley has maps and demographic data projected. Let's start with the basics. Who are the Siddis? Where are they? How many? And how did they get there? Riley, Sidi or Sidi. The term comes from Arabic say master, lord, or possibly from Swahili Sidi, East African coastal peoples. It's the general term for people of African descent in India and Pakistan. Okafor, alternate names depending on region. Sidi, Western India, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka. Shidi, Pakistan, Karachi, Makran Coast. Habshi, Northern India, Hyderabad. From Arabic, Habash. Abyssinia, Ethiopia. Kaffir, Sri Lanka. From Arabic, Kaffir, non-believer, used by Arab traders to describe non-Muslim Africans. Chen population? Riley estimates vary widely because South Asian censuses don't have a specific African descent category. Best estimates: India, 250,000, 600,000, Pakistan, 50,000 to 250,000, Sri Lanka, 3,000 to 5,000, Kaffirs, Bangladesh, under 1,000, very small, poorly documented. Total, 300,000 to 850,000 across South Asia, Okafor. But these are likely undercounts. Many Siddis have intermarried over centuries, so their African ancestry isn't visible or isn't acknowledged. The actual number with African DNA could be higher. Where they live, Riley. Primary concentrations in India: 1. Gujarat State, Jamba Village, near Junagadh, largest city concentration, 5,000. Gir Forest region, several villages. Total Gujarat, 20,000 to 50,000. 2. Karnataka State, Uttara Kannada District, multiple villages. Belgaum District, total Karnataka, 100,000 to 250,000, largest city population. 3. Goa, scattered communities, mostly Catholic, Portuguese colonial influence. Total Goa, 5,000, 10,000. 4. Hyderabad, Telangana, historically significant, city nobles and soldiers in medieval period. Modern population small, mostly assimilated. Total, 5,000 to 10,000. 5. Maharashtra, Mumbai region, scattered rural areas. Total, 10,000 to 20,000. Okafor in Pakistan, Karachi, largest city, estimated 50,000 to 100,000 Shidis. Makran Coast, Balochistan coastal communities, estimated 50,000 to 150,000. Many work as fishermen, labourers, musicians. In Sri Lanka, Puttalam district, northwest coast, Kaffir community, 3,000 to 5,000. Distinct Creole language, mix of Bantu languages, Sinhala, Portuguese. Act 2. How they arrived. The roots int. SALTD. Evidence Lab Day. Banks writes on the board: 3 waves of African arrival in South Asia. Banks. The Siddis didn't arrive in one wave. There were multiple periods, multiple routes, spanning over 1,500 years. Wave 1, Arab slave trade, 7th to 18th centuries. Okafor. The earliest wave, starting in the 7th century, same time as Islam's expansion and the Arab conquest of North Africa, Arab traders began enslaving East Africans. She projects a map showing trade routes from East Africa to Arabia to India. Okafor. The routes we documented in episode 5: Red Sea route, Horn of Africa, Somalia, Ethiopia, Yemen, Oman, Western India. Indian Ocean route, Swahili coast, Kenya, Tanzania, Zanzibar, Oman, Persian Gulf, Western India. Riley Arab merchants purchased or captured East Africans and transported them on dhows, Arab sailing vessels. They were sold in Arabian ports, then many were resold to Indian rulers, merchants and traders. Banks. Why India? What did they do with them? Okafor. Multiple roles. 1. Military slave soldiers, purchased by Indian sultanates and kingdoms as elite troops. 2. Palace guards, trusted because they had no local family ties. 3. Domestic servants, wealthy households. 4. Labourers, agriculture, construction. 5. Pearl divers, especially in Gujarat coast. Chen military slaves? Like the Mamluks in Egypt? Okafor, exactly. Similar system. Enslaved Africans, trained as soldiers, sometimes rose to high positions. In some cases, they even became rulers. The Habshi Sultans. Riley, let me show you something incredible. Between the 15th and 16th centuries, there were multiple African origin rulers in India. He pulls up images of historical monuments and portraits. The Habshi dynasty of Bengal, 1487 to 1493. Babak Shah Habshi, African origin general who seized power in Bengal, eastern India. Short-lived dynasty, but proof that Africans reached highest levels of power. Malik Ambar, 1548 to 1626, born in Ethiopia, enslaved as child, sold to Arab traders. Transported to India, purchased by minister in Deccan region. Eventually freed, built his own army. Became Prime Minister of Ahmednagar Sultanate, central India. Military genius, defeated Mughal Empire multiple times. Built irrigation systems, founded cities. One of most powerful men in 17th century India. Okafor Malik Ambar is proof that even in bondage, some Africans rose to extraordinary positions. But for every Malik Ambar, there were thousands in slavery with no names, no monuments, no memory. Wave 2, Portuguese slave trade, 16th through 8th centuries. Banks. Second wave. The Portuguese. Okafor, Portugal colonized parts of India starting in the early 1500s. Goa, conquered 1510, remained Portuguese until 1961. Daman and Diu, coastal enclaves, trading posts along West Coast Riley. The Portuguese operated the Mozambique-Goa trade route. They captured or purchased enslaved Africans in Mozambique, their East African colony, and shipped them to Goa. He shows ship manifests. Riley. Portuguese colonial records document thousands of escravos Kaffirs, African slaves, in Goa. They worked plantations, coconut spices, construction, churches, forts, domestic service, dock labour, Okafor. Many were forcibly converted to Catholicism. The Portuguese imposed Christianity on their colonies, so today many Goan cities have Portuguese surnames and are Catholic. Banks. Enslaved, transported across an ocean, forced to change their religion, given European names. Another erasure. Another attempt to destroy identity. Wave 3. Indentured labour and late trade, 18th and 19th centuries. Riley. The final wave, smaller than the first two. After the formal end of slavery in British territories, 1833, some Africans still arrived in India as indentured labourers or through semi-legal trade networks. Okafor, the British controlled much of India by the 1800s. While slavery was officially illegal, the system of indenture allowed continued exploitation. Some East Africans were brought as contract workers, which was often slavery by another name. Chen, how late did this continue? Officially, the East African slave trade to India ended in the late 1800s when the British Navy suppressed it, but illicit trade continued into the early 1900s in remote areas. Riley pulls up genetic studies on the screen. Riley, now the science. Multiple genetic studies have tested Siddis populations. The results are conclusive. They are descended from East Africans. Study 1, Shah L, 2011, Stanford University, Riley. Indian Siddis, African descendants with Indian admixture. Published in American Journal of Human Genetics, 2011. Lead researcher, Annalaba Basu, Stanford University. Methods: tested Siddis populations from Gujarat and Karnataka. Analyzed Y chromosome, paternal lineage, mitochondrial DNA, maternal lineage, and autosomal DNA, overall ancestry. Results: maternal lineage mtDNA, predominantly haplogroup L sub-Saharan African, especially East Africa, haplogroup L0, L1, L2. L3, all East African markers. Paternal lineage, Y chromosome, mix of haplogroup E, African and South Asian haplogroups, evidence of intermarriage over generations. Autosomal DNA, 50 to 70% African ancestry, 30 to 50% South Asian, varies by community. Okafor translation. The Siddis maternal lines trace directly back to East Africa. Their mothers' mothers' came from the Swahili coast, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique. Banks, the same regions where we documented Hebrew present. Study 2, Narang et al., 2011. University of Pune, Riley, recent admixture in an Indian population of African ancestry, published in American Journal of Human Genetics, 2011. Researchers, University of Pune, India, plus Stanford collaboration. Focus Karnataka Siddis specifically, key findings. Admixture occurred 200 to 300 years ago, most recent wave. But earlier admixture events also detected, suggesting multiple arrival periods. African ancestry concentrated in specific communities, less mixing in isolated villages. So some communities kept their African ancestry relatively pure for centuries? In isolated villages, yes. Caste-like social barriers prevented intermarriage. But in urban areas, Mumbai, Hyderabad, more mixing with local populations. Study 3, Thangaraj, 2009, Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology, Hyderabad, Riley. The Genetic Ancestry of Modern Indus Valley Populations from Northwest India, published in American Journal of Human Genetics, 2009. Relevant finding. While studying broader Indian populations, they tested some Siddis individuals and confirmed East African genetic markers, distinct from indigenous Indian populations. Separate migration event, not related to ancient human migrations out of Africa, 60,000 years ago. Haplogroup E, the Ethiopian Hebrew connection. Banks, Riley. Focus on haplogroup E for a second. What's the significance? Riley. Haplogroup E is a Y chromosome haplogroup, paternal lineage, found at high frequencies in East Africa, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, North Africa, Egypt, Sudan, Middle East, Yemen, parts of Arabian Peninsula, Okafor. And critically, haplogroup E is found in high frequencies among the Beta Israel, Ethiopian Hebrews, and the Lemba, Southern African Hebrews. Riley specifically haplogroup EM215 and subclades. When we tested the Lemba episode 4, we found the Cohen modal haplotype, a subset of haplogroup E associated with Jewish priestly lineage, Banks. So when Siddis carry haplogroup E, they're carrying a marker that's present in proven Hebrew populations. Riley, correct. It doesn't prove every Siddi has Hebrew ancestry. Haplogroup E is common across East Africa broadly. But it does prove their ancestors came from the exact regions where we've documented Hebrew communities. Banks, which means when Arabs enslaved East Africans in the 8th, 10th, 12th, 15th centuries after Hebrews scattered into Africa, they were enslaving populations that included Hebrew bloodlines. Evidence Lab therefore spreads out documents, Portuguese colonial records, Arab travellers' accounts, British colonial reports. The DNA proves the Siddis came from East Africa, but we also have extensive historical documentation of how and when they arrived. Primary source 1, Ibn Battuta, 1304-1368, Okafor. Ibn Battuta, the famous Moroccan traveller. He visited India in the 1330s, 1340s and wrote detailed accounts. She pulls up a translated text. Okafor, in the city of Delhi, I saw many Abyssinians, Ethiopians, in the service of the Sultan. They are known as Habshi. Some serve as soldiers, others as palace guards. They are valued for their loyalty and strength. Riley, Habshi, the term for Africans, especially Ethiopians. By the 1300s, there were already significant numbers of Africans in India serving in military and palace roles. Primary source 2, Portuguese colonial records, 16th to 18th centuries. Okafor Portuguese records from Goa. I found these in the Arquivo Histórico Ultramarino, Overseas Historical Archive in Lisbon and Historical Archives of Goa in India. She shows scanned documents. Ocave registers from Goa, 1550 to 1750, lists of esclave slaves by origin. Mozambique, Kaffirs, East African, Ethiopian. Numbers in the thousands. Prices, ages, occupations documented. Example entry, translated. Maria, Mozambican, age 20, sold to Senor João Rodrigues for 50 gerafins to serve in household. Banks, names stripped. Reduced to origin, age, price. The same dehumanization everywhere. British colonial reports, 19th century. Riley British India Office records. I found reports from the 1800s documenting Sidi or Sidi communities. He pulls up a British administrative report from 1850s Gujarat. The Sidis are descendants of African slaves brought to this coast in previous centuries. They reside in villages near Jamba and engage in agricultural labour and charcoal burning. They are distinct in appearance and maintain separate customs. Okafor. By the 1800s, the British acknowledged the Siddis African origin, but treated them as a backward caste. The colonial caste system further marginalised them. Primary source 4, Malik Ambar's legacy. Riley Malik Ambar, the Ethiopian-born military genius who became Prime Minister of Ahmadnagar. He shows historical paintings and architectural photos. Riley. His legacy, Janjira Fort, Gujarat coast, built expanded by Siddis, became independent state ruled by Siddi Nawabs, princes, until 1947. Water management systems in Deccan region. Multiple historical texts document his life and military campaigns. Source, Malik Ambar, Power and Slavery Across the Indian Ocean by Omar Khalidi, Oxford, 2006. Banks, one man's story. Preserved because he had power, but what about the thousands, tens of thousands, who didn't? Who were they? What were their names? Okafor lost. Like everywhere else, the powerful are remembered, the enslaved are erased. Akat 5, Pakistan, the Shidis of Makran Int, SLTD Conference Room Day. Banks shifts the map focus to Pakistan. Banks, Pakistan. The Shidis, same ancestry as the Siddis, different name, different regions. OK4. Pakistan's Shidi population is concentrated along the Makran coast in Balochistan province, the southwestern coast facing the Arabian Sea. She points to Karachi, Gwadar, and coastal villages. Estimated population, 50,000 to 250,000. Wide range because no official count. How they arrived. Riley. The Makran coast was a major landing point for Arab slave ships coming from East Africa. Dhows would cross the Arabian Sea from Zanzibar, Mombasa or Somali coast and land at Gwadar, Pasni or near Karachi. Okafor, many Siddis are descendants of enslaved Africans who, 1. were brought to work as labourers or soldiers, 2. served in the armies of Balok chieftains, 3. were abandoned or escaped when slavery was abolished. Chen, what's their status today? Okafor, marginalised. Most work as fishermen, manual labourers or in low-wage jobs. They face discrimination, called Siddi as a slur. Poverty rates are high. Cultural retention, Riley. The Siddis have retained some African cultural elements, more so than Indian Siddis. He shows videos and photos. Siddi Mela, Siddi Festival, annual festival honouring Baba Gore, also called Pir Mango or Siddi Pir. Syncretistic figure, blend of African ancestor veneration and Sufi Islam. Festival includes drumming, African-style rhythms, dancing, called damal, crocodile feeding, ritual at Mango Pir Shrine near Karachi, crocodiles considered sacred. Okafor, the shrine at Mangapir, is the spiritual centre for Siddis. Every year, thousands gather. It's one of the few times they're visible in Pakistani society. DNA studies. Pakistan. Riley, genetic studies of Pakistani Siddis are limited compared to Indian Siddis, but what exists confirms the same pattern. Study. Ansari-Poor, Nasser et al. Genetic structure of the Baloch of Pakistan and Iran. Evidence for admixture in BMC Genetics 2013. Tested Baloch populations including Siddi subgroup. Confirmed East African ancestry distinct from broader Pakistani population. More comprehensive genetic study needed. Napact 6. Sri Lanka. The Kaffirs int Ltd. Bullpen Day. Banks turns to Sri Lanka on the map. Banks Sri Lanka. Island nation south of India. And there's a tiny community called the Kaffirs. About 3,000 to 5,000 people. Okafor Kaffir, from Arabic Kaffir, non-believer. Used by Arab and Portuguese slave traders to describe non-Muslim Africans. In Sri Lanka, it became the name for the Afro-Sri Lankan community. Arrival, Riley. The Kaffirs are descended from Portuguese-era slaves brought from Mozambique, Angola and other Portuguese African colonies in the 16th, 17th centuries. Okafor. The Portuguese controlled parts of Sri Lanka's coast from 1505 to 1658. They brought enslaved Africans to work, military garrison soldiers, domestic servants for Portuguese families, pearl divers. Riley. When the Dutch conquered Portuguese Sri Lanka, 1658, some Africans remained. When the British took over, 1796, the community was well established but small. Last language, Kaffir Creole, Riley. What's fascinating about the Kaffirs? They've preserved a unique Creole language that no one else speaks. He plays audio clip, strange mix of sounds unfamiliar to most listeners. Sri Lankan Kaffir Creole, or Kaffir Portuguese Creole. Base, Bantu languages from East-Southeast Africa, mixed with Sinhala, Sri Lankan language, Portuguese, Tamil. Only 100 to 200 fluent speakers left, mostly elderly. UNESCO classifies it as severely endangered. Okafor. When the language dies, a piece of Africa dies with it. That's what erasure looks like. Not violent, not sudden, just slow forgetting until nothing's left. Modern status. Where do they live now? Okafor primarily in Puttalam district, northwest coast. Small villages. They're very poor, mostly work as manual labourers or fishermen. Riley, Sri Lankan society barely acknowledges them. They're not in textbooks, not represented in government, not included in cultural narratives. Banks. Invisible. Again, 3,000 people carrying African bloodlines on an island in the Indian Ocean. Who knows they're there? Who cares? But DNA doesn't lie. They exist. They're proof of the scattering. Bangladesh. Minimal but documented int. Ltd. Conference room. Day Riley. Bangladesh, formerly East Bengal, East Pakistan. African presence is minimal but documented. Okafor. Remember the Habshi dynasty of Bengal, 1480s, 1490s, African rulers. That was in Bengal, which is now split between West Bengal, India, and Bangladesh. Riley. Today there are very small communities, probably under 1,000 people, with African ancestry in Bangladesh. Mostly in Chittagong, southeastern coast, Dhaka, capital city, scattered. Any studies? Almost none. This is a major research gap. Bangladesh is one of the world's most densely populated countries, but Afro-Bangladeshi populations haven't been studied genetically or historically in any systematic way. Okafor, likely because the numbers are so small, they've been absorbed into the broader Bengali population. African ancestry might be there, but invisible. Act 8, the Hebrew connection, connecting the dots. In TSALTD, bullpen, night. The team reconvenes. Banks writes on the board. East Africa, 70 AD, 7th century AD. Hebrews migrate, settle, 7th to 19th century AD. Arab-Portuguese slave trade. Result, Siddis in India equals Hebrew bloodlines? Banks. Let's make the connection explicit. We're not saying every Siddi is a descendant of Hebrews. We're saying when East Africans were enslaved and brought to India, the population they were taken from included Hebrew bloodlines. Riley. Here's the timeline. 70 AD and 135 AD. Hebrews scatter from Jerusalem, flee to Egypt, North Africa, down into East Africa, Episode 3. 2nd, 7th centuries AD, Hebrews migrate deeper into Africa, including East African coast, Kenya, Tanzania, Somalia, Ethiopia, Episode 4. Beta Israel in Ethiopia, proven Hebrew community via DNA. Lemba in southern Africa, proven Hebrew DNA, Cohen-modal haplotype. 7th century onward, Arab slave trade begins, targeting East Africa. Millions of East Africans enslaved over 1,300 years, some transported to India. Result, Siddis equals descendants of East Africans, includes Hebrew bloodlines. Okafor, the DNA supports it. Siddis carry haplogroup L, maternal East African. Siddis carry haplogroup E, paternal East African Ethiopian, same as Beta Israel and Lemba. These are the same markers found in proven Hebrew populations. But can we prove definitively that Siddis have Hebrew ancestry? Banks, not without testing specifically for the Cohen-modal haplotype or other Hebrew-specific markers. And that study hasn't been done yet. Riley, but here's what we can say. The Siddis came from the exact regions, East Africa, during the exact time period after Hebrew scattering, carrying the exact genetic markers, haplogroups E and L found in proven Hebrew populations. The circumstantial case is overwhelming. Banks, and that fulfills Deuteronomy 28:64, scattered among all people. The prophecy doesn't say scattered to places close by. It says among all people. South Asia is 4,000 miles from Jerusalem. If Hebrew bloodlines reached India via the scattering and subsequent enslavement, the prophecy is fulfilled. Act 9. Modern City Life, Marginalization and Struggle int. SLTD, Evidence Lab, Day. Okafor pulls up photos and news articles about modern Siddi communities. Okafor, let's talk about their lives today, because this isn't ancient history. Siddis are alive right now, and they're suffering. Poverty. Riley studies show Siddis are among the poorest communities in India. He shows statistics. Literacy rate, 30 to 50%, versus national average 75%. Employment, mostly daily wage labour, agriculture, forestry. Income, below poverty line in most communities. Housing, substandard. Many lack electricity, running water. In Karnataka, many Siddi villages are in forest areas. They work as woodcutters or collect forest products, honey, herbs. It's hard, low-paying labour. Discrimination, Chen. Do they face racism? Okafor, absolutely. Dark skin in India is heavily stigmatised. Siddis face, name-calling, or blackie derogatory, exclusion from temples, some upper-caste temples bar entry, employment discrimination, passed over for jobs, marriage exclusion, difficult to marry outside Siddi community. I found testimonies. Let me read one. He pulls up an interview transcript from a 2015 study. My name is Ravi. I'm Siddi from Karnataka. When I go to town, people stare. Children point and laugh. One time a shopkeeper refused to serve me. He said, "We don't serve your kind here." My kind? What does that mean? I was born in India, I speak Kannada local language, but because my skin is dark, I'm not Indian enough. Banks, not Indian enough, not African anymore. Caught between worlds. No homeland, no recognition. Exactly like the prophecy said. No ease, trembling heart, sorrow of mind. Lack of government support. Okafor, in 2003, the Indian government officially recognized Siddis as a scheduled tribe, a designation meant to provide affirmative action benefits, education quotas, job reservations, development programs. Chen. That sounds positive. Okafor in theory. In practice, implementation has been weak. Many Siddi villages still lack schools, healthcare, infrastructure. The benefits exist on paper, but don't reach the communities. Riley, and in some states, recognition varies. Gujarat Siddis have scheduled tribe status. Karnataka cities have it in some districts but not others. The bureaucracy makes it difficult to access benefits. Cultural erasure, Riley. The Siddis are losing their African identity. He shows photos of Siddi children. Most young Siddis don't know their African origins. They don't speak any African languages. Those were lost generations ago. They practice Hinduism or Islam, wear Indian clothes, eat Indian food. The only thing that marks them as different is their appearance. Okafor in Goa, the Catholic Siddis have Portuguese last names, Fernandes, Rodrigues de Souza. In Gujarat, many have Indian Hindu names. The African names are gone. Banks, names stripped, language stripped, culture stripped, religion changed, identity erased. The same pattern everywhere. The children of Israel were scattered, assimilation forced upon them. But the blood remains. The DNA doesn't forget. Siddi organizations and activism, Riley. In recent years, some Siddis have started organizing. He shows websites and photos. Siddi Development Society, Karnataka, advocacy group fighting for education, healthcare, land rights. All India Siddi Jamaat Federation, loose coalition trying to unite Siddi communities across India. Individual activists, Jermia Siddi, Karnataka, educator, cultural preservation advocate. Noor Jahan, Gujarat, women's rights activist. Okafor, they're trying to reclaim their history, connect with their African roots, but it's difficult when you don't know where your ancestors came from. East Africa is a big place. Mozambique, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, they don't know. Banks, because the records were never kept, or they were kept by the enslavers, and the enslaved were just cargo, no names, no stories, just numbers. Act 10, Prophetic Fulfillment Analysis. In TS Conference Room Night, the team does final analysis. Banks at the whiteboard. Let's connect this to Deuteronomy 28. How does South Asia fulfill the curses? She writes, Deuteronomy 28:64, scattered among all people. South Asia, 1.9 billion people. 4 countries, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and hidden among them 300,000 to 850,000 Siddis carrying East African blood, including, we argue, Hebrew bloodlines. Okafor, among all people, doesn't mean majority presence. It means dispersed. Even small populations fulfill this. The Siddis are proof. Hebrews scattered so far that they ended up 4,000 miles east, across an ocean, in a completely different civilization. Riley, Deuteronomy 28:37, and thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations whither the Lord shall lead thee. Banks byword, mocked, ridiculed. The Siddis are called Kalu, excluded from temples, denied service in shops. They're visible because of their skin, but invisible in society. Exactly as prophesied. Chen, Deuteronomy 28:65, and among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. But the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart, and failing of eyes, and sorrow of mind. Okafor, no ease. The Siddis live in poverty, illiteracy, discrimination, struggling to survive in a society that doesn't accept them. They can't go back to Africa. They don't know where they came from. They can't fully integrate into Indian society. They're too visibly different. No ease, no rest. Banks, Deuteronomy 28:68, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. She writes on the board, into Egypt again, back into bondage. With ships, calls dhows across Indian Ocean. Sold unto enemies, calls Arab, Portuguese slave traders banks. This verse is the key. The Siddis' ancestors were taken on ships, dhows, Portuguese vessels, and sold into bondage. Transported across the Indian Ocean, sold to rulers, merchants, wealthy households. Egypt symbolizes bondage. They went back into bondage, with ships, exactly as prophesied, Riley. And no man shall buy you, the end of the verse. Some scholars interpret this as, at the end of the scattering, they'll be so worthless, even as slaves, that no one will buy them. Others say it means they'll be scattered so far, broken so completely, that there's no market left. Banks, either way, it describes total desolation. And look at the Siddis today, forgotten, impoverished, marginalized. No one cares, no one's coming to save them. No man buys them, not as slaves anymore, but also not as equals. They're left in the corners of society, surviving but not thriving. Banks stands at the murder board. Banks, South Asia, 4 countries, 300,000 to 850,000 Siddis, descended from East Africans enslaved and transported across the Indian Ocean over 1,300 years. DNA proves it. History documents it. And if Hebrews scattered into East Africa after 70 AD, which we've proven, then the Siddis carry Hebrew blood. She writes on the board, proven, Siddis are East African descendants. DNA, haplogroups L and E, transported via Arab and Portuguese slave trade, 7th to 19th centuries, enslaved, marginalized, forgotten, 4,000 miles from Jerusalem, scattered among all people. Modern population, 300,000 to 850,000 across India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. Connected to prophecy, Deuteronomy 28:64, among all people. South Asia fulfills Deuteronomy 28:68, with ships, dhows across Indian Ocean. Deuteronomy 28:37, byword called kalu, excluded, mocked. Deuteronomy 28:65, no ease, poverty, discrimination, marginalization. The case, after 70 AD, Hebrews scattered into Africa. Over centuries they migrated to East Africa, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique. Starting in the 7th century, Arab and Portuguese slave traders captured East Africans and transported them across the Indian Ocean to South Asia. Millions over 1,300 years. Among those millions were descendants of scattered Hebrews. Today their descendants, the Siddis, live in poverty and obscurity in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. They don't know they're carrying Hebrew blood, but the DNA is there. The prophecy was fulfilled. They were scattered to the uttermost parts of the earth, and they're still there. Riley, from Jerusalem to the Swahili coast, from the Swahili coast to Gujarat, from one end of the earth to the other. The prophecy doesn't lie. And if we could test the Siddis for the Cohen modal haplotype, the genetic marker of the Hebrew priesthood, I believe we'd find it. Because it's in the Lemba, it's in the Beta Israel. And the Siddis came from the same region, Banks. That's the next step, genetic testing specifically for Hebrew markers. Until then, we have the circumstantial case, and it's overwhelming. She points to the map, East Africa to India, arrows connecting them. They tried to scatter us so far we'd forget who we were. They succeeded. The Siddis don't know. But Deuteronomy 30 says the Most High will gather us. From the uttermost parts. From the ends of the earth. That includes India. That includes Pakistan. That includes Sri Lanka. That includes every Siddhi who's wondering why they don't fit in. Why they're darker than everyone else. Why their ancestors crossed an ocean to a land they don't belong in. She taps the board. We're finding them. We're documenting them. We're bringing the receipts, because the scattering happened, and the gathering is coming.